in types of democracy. We have two types of democracy: direct democracy and indirect democracy. Direct democracy, in this type of democracy, every adult citizens participate in making laws and decisions for the state. This was practiced in ancient Greek city-states in Athens during the 2nd century. Because of the population was not too large at that time, so therefore people practice what we call direct democracy. Another forms of democracy is what we call indirect or representative democracy. In these types of democracy, the qualified adult citizens in the state elect representative into legislative who then make laws on behalf of the citizens. This type replaced direct democracy in modern states as a result of the change in size and population of the state. Inasmuch as in modern state the population has increased so much that there is no need for us to practice direct democracy. So we now elect people on our behalf that represent us in parliament. That is another forms of democracy. So we have direct democracy, we also have indirect democracy or representative democracy. So let's look at the factors that hinder the operation of democracy. One is interference of the Electoral Commission. This commission should be allowed to perform their duties without fear or favor, for its interference hinders free and fair elections. So therefore, if the executive arms of government interfering with the activities or the work of the Electoral Commission, it also has the tendency to undermine the operation of democracy. Then another factors that also hinder the operation of democracy is illiteracy and ignorance. This is another factor that hinder democracy because it prevents them from performing their civic duties of voting during elections. Countries where there is a high rate of illiteracy, people don't even know how powerful they are, that they have the means of changing government. And sometimes out of ignorance, these people will tell you government has nothing to do with me and have nothing to do with government. So it's also a factor that hinder the operation of democracy, that is illiteracy and ignorance. Another factors that hinder the operation of democracy is a free, fair press. When there is an absence of a free and fair press that can enlighten the citizens and expose the abnormalities, democracy is affected. When the press is being muscled by government, when it is being stifled by the politicians, which to educate the citizens about the abnormalities, about the bad governance of the politicians or the government that is in power, then it is also serving as an stop obstacles towards the operation of democracy. Then another one is coup, that is under a military rule. This hinder democracy because the constitution is suspended. When there is a military coup, there is a suspension of the constitution of the state, and if the constitution is suspended, it means there is no guarantee for fundamental human rights. Of course, rivalry among ethnic groups, this occurs during elections and can eventually lead to majority dominating the minority. Democracy is also being hindered because of rivalry among the ethnic group, and if that happens, even the minority cannot see their way, and democracy is trying to cater for everybody. It's also a huge problem for the operation of democracy. Of course, the absence of an independent and impartial judiciary. This hinders democracy, especially in justifications of election petitions. If the judiciary is not independent, you cannot confidence enough to challenge the outcome of election result to the Supreme Court. But if you are sure that the judiciary is independent, you can challenge the outcome of election result. And we've seen countries who have proven to the test of time. For example, country like Kenya, there was a case when the election result was challenged to the Supreme Court, and the court ruled that the election was not free and fair, so they conducted another elections. So in order for democracy to operate, we need to have an independent judiciary. But when there is an absence of independence and impartial judiciary, this can also affect the operations of democracy. Of course, the desperation to win elections by politicians and leaders with selfish or individual interests, this can also hinder the successful operation of democracy, because a politician wants to go by all means to win elections. You see the intensified intimidations and all of these. When we talk about the tenets of democracy, we say there should be free and fair elections, but we've seen cases, in fact, voters are being intimidated for them not to go out and vote, and that undermines the operations of democracy. So these are the factors that hinder the operations of democracy. So let's look at what are the merit and demerit of democracy. In other words, the advantages and disadvantages. So let's start with the merit of democracy. One, free choice of political leaders. It gives the electorate the opportunity to elect leaders of their choice. That is one good thing about democracy. You have the option to choose the leader you want to support. But in a totalitarianism, when there is only the existence of one political party, the citizens are left with no choice. But in democracy, you have a free choice of political leaders. Of course, political stability. Democracy promotes stability in the country. A bad government can be replaced peacefully through periodic elections. Inasmuch as there is a time bound of the office of the president, if a government continues to be bad, the citizens can replace that government through periodic elections in a peaceful means. So there is a political stability. Of course, legitimacy. It gives legitimacy to the elected government, because the elected government has the support of the populace. You also have participations in government affairs. It encourages citizens to be involved in their government and policies. It promotes a sense of responsibility and belonging. That is also another good thing about democracy. Of course, equality of individual. There is individual equality, freedom and protection of their possessions and rights where democracy operates. So your property can be protected, your right is also protected under the operations of democracy. Then decision making. Democracy does not believe in suppression of opinion. Decision is reached through discussions, arguments, and persuasions. The government will not just take up decisions. It has to persuade, it has to discuss, they have to dialogue with the citizens. That is another good thing about democracy. Democracy also promotes the principle of checks and balances and separations of powers. So let's look at the demerit of democracy. One, look at the representation. The representation of the people may not be representing the interests and may not be representing the interests of the people or not the interests of the citizens. We've seen situations where these honorable members of parliament that are being elected into those positions to represent the citizens will tend to represent themselves and not the people, or rather the interests of the citizens. That is another problem of democracy. Of course, you also have rule of ignorance. Democracy does not pay attention to quality but quantity. Vote are also counted and not weighed, because sometimes the tendency that many people who are even voting, they don't even know why they are voting. And in as much as democracy is not looking at the quality, is looking at quantity, you might end up electing mediocres in governance. People who are not necessary to lead the state will end up becoming leader. That is another problem of democracy. Then of course, decision making process is slow. Before final decision is taken on public issue, everybody is given opportunity to express his or her view. In many cases, wrong decisions are adhered to because of the tenets of democracy